evening, everyone. I'm Cherry Chan, Assistant Professor in Theological Studies at CGST, the host of tonight. The lecture will be conducted in English. If you require Cantonese or Mandarin translation, please kindly contact our helpers located at the end of the hall for translation devices. Welcome to the second session of the Josephine Soul Culture and Ethics Lecture. It is both a pleasure and honor to have you with us this evening. The Josephine Soul Culture and Ethics Lecture series at CGST is generously sponsored by the Josephine Soul Fund. This fund was established in remembrance of Miss Josephine Soul, a remarkable feature in Hong Kong's church landscape. As the editor-in-chief of the magazine Campus in Taiwan, she also founded several influenced publications, including Frontline in Singapore, as well as Breakthrough and Breakthrough Youth in Hong Kong. Ms. Soul dedicated over 20 years of her life to battling cancer and championing youth work. She passed away on Easter in 1982 and is remembered as a prophetic voice of her generation. Continuing Ms. Soul's fervent passion for our city, the Josephine Soul Culture and Ethics Lecture series invites distinguished scholars and church leaders from China and abroad. They come together to discuss vital issues such as the contextualization of Christianity, the reconstruction of Chinese culture, and ethical considerations, all aimed at raising awareness among Chinese believers. The theme for this year's lectures is Culture Crossroads, Navigating the Dynamics of Intercultural Interactions. Tonight, we have the privilege of hearing from Dr. Patrick Fung, who will be speaking on intercultural leadership and global mission. Dr. Fung is a native of Hong Kong and has undergone medical training in both Australia and the UK. He and his wife, Jenny, previously served as medical missionaries in South Asia. Currently, Dr. Fung serves as the Global Ambassador of OMF International, having dedicated 18 years as its General Director before. His extensive experience also includes being a member of the Lausanne Movement's International Board, and he presently chairs the advisory team of Lausanne YL Gen, as well as the program for the 4th Lausanne Congress on World Evangelization. Following Dr. Fung's address, we will have a respondent from Reverend Edwin Lam, Assistant Professor of Practical Studies at CGST. Pastor Lam brings a wealth of experience from his time in local churches across East Asia, where he utilized God-centered professional skills in social work and other disciplines to foster holistic transformation. So, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Fung to the stage.
Greetings to all of you. Thank you very much for this invitation, and I want to thank the Lord for this very special opportunity for the 50th anniversary of CGST. Some of you may already know I actually was a graduate of CGST in the 80s, and I thank the Lord for this year, the special theme. I love the theme, A Mission and Beyond, exploring the intergenerational, interdenominational, cross-cultural, and cross-regional dimensions of theological education. Now, of course, I also thank the Lord for the Josephine Soul's lecture on culture and ethics, which has run for many years. Actually, the year she died, I got news as well because I was in Australia. That was the year I graduated from my medical school, and that was the year I also received news that she passed away. And her writings really deeply impacted me as well. And for this year, the theme, as you notice for Josephine Soul's lecture, is what in English is Cultural Crossroads, Navigating the Dynamics of Intercultural Interactions. I wasn't quite sure whether you start with English first or we start with Chinese first. But I must say I was deeply impressed and fascinated by the Chinese topic. So I cannot run away without saying that 文化交融,跨文化互動妙態. That's a fascinating topic. Well, I don't think it's translated. I probably started with Chinese, translated in English, but vice versa. It just, if you understand Chinese, you understand it's a wonderful, wonderful topic. So also it's really good to see old friends and new friends as well, including Dr. Rula, whom we serve together on the Langham board as well. So good to see you, Dr. Rula. And so today I've been given the topic as Dr. Wong came to see, well, actually I came to see you, I think about 2 years ago. We had lunch together and you asked me if I could give a topic on intercultural leadership and global mission. So I followed that advice, and this is the topic I will be sharing today. Now, before I continue, I have, first of all, a few slides for you just to enjoy first. I'm not going to say anything, but just enjoy it. It is by an artist, a Chinese artist from China, originally, but now residing in Germany. She published a book, a pictogram, and the topic was East meets West, all by pictures, no words, well, just a few words, but you can see, and I'm sure you can work out which one is East and which one is West, all right? So just enjoy the pictures. I'm not going to say anything, all right? So here we are, we'll start. Oh, sorry, it's not seeing anything? Oh, just my apology. I thought it's showing already. Okay, all right, sorry, that's the pictogram. All right, start again. I probably like this one the best. As you travel in China, probably you identify with the red one much more than the blue one, right? I'm sure. One time I was in Beijing, exactly what I saw was the red picture. Now today I want to just approach this topic from two perspectives, so there is a part one and part two. First is from an anthropological perspective. The other one is from a biblical, a missiological perspective. And of course, many of you are familiar with this iceberg analogy of culture. And this analogy is not new to you. What is above the surface and what is below. And on the surface, there is the behavior, the practice, the words expressed. Below are deeply rooted beliefs, values, and assumptions. And many of you have seen this picture. And of course, I mean, you can use Paul Hibert's picture, horse iceberg model, many ways. And we know that cultures are complex. And this afternoon, we already heard the first lecture given by Dr. Lee. And things are not always what they seem. Now, I want to give you an example, a personal example first, which happened to me just recently, just to illustrate the point why cultures are complex. And many of you realize that there was the 4th Lausanne Congress recently. Some of you were there, actually, in September. And the first one, 74, by John Stott, Billy Graham, and then the second, the third one in Cape Town, and the recent one was in Seoul, Korea. And 2 years ago, the Lausanne board asked me if I could help to be the chair of the planning committee. So it's hard work, but I thank the Lord for the opportunity to work together with the planning committee. We have 12 people from different cultures, different backgrounds, Koreans, Americans, Africans, Middle Easterns, and all that together. So we were working together for 2 years in planning for this Lausanne committee. The challenge was we will have 5,000 people from different cultures all attending this conference. It's not easy. How do you kind of meet the requirements and also try to be sensitive to different cultures? One topic came up, which was a bit unusual because I thought that should not be an issue, but it became an issue, was logistical arrangements of meal times. And some Western colleagues suggest that because the program is very packed, we should cancel the dinner time. But you serve food in the corridor from 4 o'clock onwards. So anyone can eat at 4 o'clock, 4:30, 5 o'clock, anytime you like. So there's no fixed time, but there's food available in the corridor, which sounds like a very good, practical, flexible suggestion. There were Korean leaders sitting in that meeting. And this is how they say, well, actually, we can do it. That's their first response. And we're happy to do it. But it's a little bit inconvenient. Just hear what they say. We can do it, we're happy to do it, but it's a little bit inconvenient. So the Western college jumped to that statement and say, let's do it. Okay, logistical arrangement is easy. We can solve that problem. It's just all logistics. So as a chair, I said, just stop. Can I ask the Korean colleagues to repeat what they say? I say, Korean colleagues, leaders, can you say again what you say just now in a bit more detail? Help us to understand. The second time they say, this is what they say. They say, actually, as Koreans in our culture, not to serve dinner is shameful. You notice the word they use, it's shameful. Meaning, as hosts, how can you not serve dinner? That would be, not respecting our guests. You see, for them to come from a shame-honor culture, they start with, we can do it, we're happy to do it. But actually, you need to listen to the last part. It's inconvenient, but what they mean inconvenience is shameful for us not to serve dinner. So I think the Western college sort of pull back and say, okay, now we understand. So again, here is what is the service value and what is the deep assumptions. Now, a well-renowned anthropologist whom you know very well, Charles Kraft, also taught in Fuller for many years, and he says that, well, the word, the term culture is the label anthropologists give to structure, customs, and underlying worldview assumptions. So worldview assumptions are very, very important. You need to go through to the deep level of culture. This is the deepest level of presupposition. So there is a service behavior, but there are deep down value presuppositions. But Charles Kraft didn't use iceberg. He used river as an example, which is similar. You say, what is on the surface of the river is deeply affected by what's underneath, which you cannot see. So you must go deep down to understand what is underneath. And also, Paul Hibbert used the behavior as well, the tree on top, and what is underneath below as well. And again, you can use different analogies, whether it's a river or iceberg or tree. But let me give you one more example, just trying to be a bit more open about myself, what happened to me in learning about culture. I joined OMF as missionaries in '89. We went to Pakistan to serve as medical missionaries. But before any missionaries join OMF, you have to attend what we call the orientation course, training course for all missionaries at the headquarters in OMF. So we have Koreans, Americans, British people, those from Taiwan, others join together. And every day you had lectures and all that. But one particular day, we were free and for half a day. So we decided to go across the road. OMF next door is actually the Botanical Gardens in Singapore. Very nice, So I invited another couple, also brand new missionary, American couples, say, why don't we go and visit the Botanical Gardens? They said, yeah, let's go there. So we went there, and it was very hot. And we went from 10 o'clock, lunchtime came. We need to have lunch. No restaurants, except some shops. They sell hot dogs, which is good. I thought Americans should like hot dogs, which is good. So I asked them, would you like hot dogs? Sure. So as Chinese, we felt that it is good to be hospitable, to be generous. So I said, why don't I treat you, I'll buy the hot dogs. They had a 4-year-old son. So I thought, how many hot dogs should I buy? So I decided to buy 5, right? 2 for my wife, them, husband and wife, and the 4-year-old son. So we bought 5. So I gave them 3 hot dogs. When I gave them 3 hot dogs, I noticed that they look a bit awkward. And then they look somehow a little bit unhappy. And so the whole afternoon we were in the gardens, visiting different places. I noticed something is not right. So in the end, at about 4 o'clock, I said, no, I felt something is wrong. Well, tell me, something is bothering you? Initially he said no, but actually in the end he said it. He said, well, we were not happy that you bought 3 hot dogs for us. I say, why? Because you took away the choice. We decide whether my son should have hot dog or not you. You're not the parents. You see, for them, choice is very important. For me, hospitality is very important. From my perspective, using Dr. Lee's word, I'm the normative, you're not the normative. It is normal to be generous. For them, choice is normal. You take away my choice, you are not normal. You see, again here, where the cultural clash is, again here. So when we talk about culture, tonight we talk about intercultural leadership. And I want to use 3 words, and I think sometimes we use these 3 words interchangeably. They are not interchangeable. And I want to explain why. First, the word multicultural compared to cross-cultural and intercultural. First of all, multicultural. Multicultural is all the different groups, different cultures together. I mean, Hong Kong could be multicultural, where people from South Asia, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and all that. But the challenge with being multicultural is this. You can coexist, but you don't care about what happens to the other person. You have no interest, in a way, in the other person. A coexistence only. That is multicultural. You don't give attention to what happened to them. And I noticed that in my father's case. My parents migrated to Canada, to Toronto, 25 years ago, right? And he was there in Toronto for 25 years, but he never spoke a word of English. I said, how did you survive? He said, I survived very well. I go to the supermarket. There's one line only speaks Cantonese. You go to a petrol station. There's one corner only speaks Chinese. You can go there. Bank, one line speaks Chinese only. So I never need to use English. Actually, he was wrong. He used English 1 word when he went to Tim Horton to buy coffee. Now, those of you who are from Canada know what Tim Horton specializes in coffee. And my father knows 1 English word, double, meaning double sugar, double milk. So for his whole life, he knows 1 English word, that is double. But that is multicultural, but he has no interest in the other culture. I hope we are not like that. But then we come to the second part, what we call cross-cultural, is entering another culture, of course. And then you change, in reference to the other culture. I'll give you an example of Hudson Taylor. Now, Hudson Taylor went to China, you remember. Many people, pay attention to Hudson Taylor. He insisted that all the missionaries need to wear Chinese clothes. How did that start? Was that when he went there, actually he was in his British attire, coats. preschools. And the Chinese were asking him, the Chinese say, how come you have buttons at the back of your coat? What are they for? They have no purpose, just for show, right? Aesthetic purpose. Buttons, why you have 4 buttons at the back? And so from then on, he said, no, I need to wear Chinese clothes. So he changed. That is cross-cultural. You enter into another person's culture. But then we go on to something more important, which is intercultural. And that's why I like the theme for this year, a mission and beyond. It is more than just cross-cultural because you respect other people's culture. You learn from others as well. There is the mutuality, which is really, really important. Why intercultural? I think intercultural is important because as we follow the Lord's command to love one another, and actually the lack of intercultural friendliness is a significant barrier to our effectiveness towards serving together for God's purpose. I think this is really important to be intercultural. Now this chart, as you can see, the arrow goes to the right-hand side, is your sensitivity to being intercultural. The right-hand side is, as you become more sensitive, you evaluate customs and behavior relative to the cultural context I am in. While on the other end, if you're not sensitive, you evaluate another culture according to standards of your own. I'll give you an example. In OMF, we have, people from different cultures. We have people from 30 countries working together. Now, we have a culture of everybody is free to speak. Everybody can have a voice, whether you're male, female, young, and old. Everybody can participate in the discussion, right? Now, some people, as they come and join the group, may not be too comfortable in that culture. And we may judge, that person is shy, that person is whatever. But just to be careful, because that person may come from a culture, what we call a high power distance, right? Which I'll explain a bit later. When they come into your group, they need to be invited to speak. They don't feel comfortable to speak freely. That's a high power distance. So I think we need to be very careful when we make judgment on people. Do we evaluate from the context where I come from or from the context that they come from as well? David Harley is a missiologist who lived in Africa for many years. I like what he wrote. He says that we need to be careful as we understand our own culture and warn against assuming that our cultural way of doing things is normative. Again, the word normative, we are always right. We need to be prepared for being bicultural or multicultural. So I think it is really important as we talk about East and West context. I think it will be oversimplification. I think this afternoon, Dr. Lee already mentioned, you're being so Asian, you are so American, whatever. That is an oversimplification because it is what I call a rojak of culture. Any of you understand this word rojak? It's a Singapore term. Rojak is a mixture of different fruits come together, and you put a very nice sauce there. There's a shop in a place in Singapore. Any time of the day, night, morning, there's always a long queue. It's so famous, You have to wait for an hour to get your rojak plate. You can come and see me later. I tell you where it is. Rojak is the kind of a famous dish in Singapore where you put everything together. And so to say this is Western or Asian would be an oversimplification because we are talking about really an international culture. However, I like what Leanne Rumke said that the only absolute cultural values to which every culture must bow to are the eternal values to which Jesus held. Are we so kind of insisting on our own culture? Are we letting Jesus guide us in how we should behave as well? Now, whether Christians or non-Christians, many people have written books on culture, and this is a book I want to quote. He's not a Christian, but he's done a lot of research. He interviewed thousands of people from different cultures, and I thought his research is quite interesting, quite fascinating, and he divided the world into several groups of culture. What he called a linear active model, the multi-active group, and also the reactive. Now, let me explain what they are. The linear active people, that's the kind of culture, are people who plan very carefully, result-orientated, sticks to agenda, written words are very important, direct, they plan step by step. They talk half the time. The multi-active people, they talk most of the time. Now, whether you agree or not, that's his research result. They're very emotional, and they have a lot of hand movement. When they talk, they move their hands a lot. Unrestrained body language. And interestingly, they roam back and forth. Feelings before facts. And confronts emotionally. Let me start again. Did you see these slides just now? You saw this page. Okay, that's all right. So I think I was through the linear active, multi-active, and the reactive, probably the reactives, the yellow one. They are polite, they are indirect and very people-orientated and harmony-orientated, and also subtle body language. All right. Now, the book, his research summarized it in this way. Richard Lewis, he says, well, the linear active people can be described as cool, factual, decisive planners. And the British people call them the stiff upper lip people, if you are familiar with this term. They're very serious looking, deep planners. The multi-active people described as warm, emotional, talkative, and demonstrative. And the third is reactive cultures can be described as courteous, amiable, and compromises. Now, you may say, how does that apply to us? You can see his research is very interesting. He classified all the different countries, interviewed all the different peoples. You can see almost, you can guess, the Germans, the Swiss people, those from Europe are on this corner, the linear active people, right? And those up there are mostly from where? Latin America people, right? Argentinians, Brazilians, Chileans. And you can imagine the yellow one, Hong Kong, Korea, and China on this side as well. Now, I'll give you a few examples here. On this side, the linear active people, the planning. I receive invitations to speak at different places, and I see cultural differences. Quite a few times I receive invitations to preach in Germany, to go to Germany to preach quite often, in German churches, not Chinese churches, German churches. And the way they write their invitation is very interesting. They say, we welcome you, we want to invite you to come and preach. Please preach at 10:17 to 11:23. That's the invitation letter, exactly to the minute. And they mean it. You cannot be 1 minute over. And not once, a few times when I receive letters from Germany, that's how they write. They say, please, which minute to which minute? Singapore churches, come and preach on this day. Please wear a tie and a suit. That's all. Your attire, your dress code is very, very important. And of course, you know that from Switzerland as well, and also they are also, they pay attention to the planning, to the minute. It's really, really important. Now, why is this important? How does culture affect leadership? Is that, this is again from another book. And even as you label Western culture, I think we need to be very careful. Even in the West, Australians are very different from those in Europe and very different from Americans. So here, this book analyzes even the Western culture, for example. North Americans, people prefer leaders who take charge and are highly visible and assertive. You've seen that 2 days ago at the inauguration, if you heard Trump's speech. I listened to his speech, actually. And, very obvious. But yet in Norway, Netherlands, they're also from the West. People prefer leaders who are much less visible and much less assertive. Again here, you cannot just put one rule to also speak Western people. What about African culture? Again, affects leadership. I think this word is used in Dr. Ruler's paper as well. Ubuntu is a word meaning, we are who we are, not because individually, but as a group as well. I am who I am because of who we are. The idea is that we need other human beings to be human. Again here, when you use the word I, what they meant was actually we. That is actually so Pakistan culture as well. I live in Pakistan. So when we are interacting, when you have meetings, with people, the first thing is you ask them how they are, and then you have to ask them how is your wife, how are their children, their parents, including their grandparents as well. So you've got to go through that, and you need to listen very carefully, because when they say I, they mean they together. And they will do the same thing to you as you do it to them. So the first 20 minutes is asking family. Then you go to the business of meeting. So again here is the culture, right? Now, many people look at leadership and they realize that there are 5 broad dimensions of culture that particularly are relevant to leadership. And this is important as well. And here I will go through them fairly quickly. What they call a large power distance to a low power distance, a strong patronage expectation. Strong patronage meaning that it is like a social contract, like a benevolent king or the father figure. The father figure provides for the children, and children happily follow. That kind of relationship. High uncertainty avoidance versus low uncertainty avoidance, and high orientation to low orientation to context. Now, let me go through that one by one. First of all, high power distance. In a high power distance culture, people expect it is normal to have a large status gap. It is normal. It's naturally good. And, but low power distance try to minimize that gap. Now, what does that mean in practice? In a small power distance, inequality should be minimal. And if a leader makes a decision, you need to explain to people why you make that decision. You need to convince people by your rationale. You can't just say, I make that decision. No. But in a large power distance, usually you make the decision and you tell people that I have now made the decision. You don't necessarily need to explain the reasons. And, the ideal boss is autocratic, but a kind of a good father figure. Well, this is the opposite in a small power distance. Now, Hofstede is one of those who did a lot of research on this. Massive number, he did on thousands of people from different countries. And you can see here, as expected, the low power distance, the one who top are those from Switzerland, from Germany, right? And you know that, for example, in Switzerland, you know that the president, there's a confederation, they rotate every year. So no one is in charge forever. There's the kind of equal power. And also, the respect for one another. Whether you are a plumber or you are a doctor, I experienced that in Switzerland. You show the same respect, whether you are a doctor or a plumber, same respect. You feel it, the equality. While, of course, if you go down, most of the Asian countries would have a much larger kind of power distance. And of course, Hong Kong's probably somewhere in the middle. Now, some of the scholars simplify the 5 groups into 3 groups, which I think is about the same. And the second one is individualism or collectivism. What does that mean? If you belong to the culture much more individual, you own the time yourself, and it's your time. But collective is that the time belongs to the group. You don't decide what to do. And if you are in the collective culture, students speak when the group or teacher allows it, while the individual culture, students are free to speak in a class, speak up, and very, very different. Now, one of the very, very important things here in terms of the collective culture is this. Harmony should be maintained and friendship are predetermined. While if you come from the other culture, friendships are voluntary and should be fostered. I'll give you a very, very personal example. This is what happened to me. I live in Pakistan, and when I was there was no supermarket. No supermarket, so you have to buy everything from a wet market. And if you want to buy chicken, you go to a shop that sells chicken. They kill the chicken in front of you, and they give you the chicken. All right? Now, there is a wet market near our house, and I always normally buy chicken from this shop, and they would, you just choose the chicken you like.
And the shopkeeper always says this. He says, "Oh, it's good to see you. You are my friend." Because he meant that we are in the same neighborhood. You know, we live in the same district, neighborhood. We're in the community. You're my friend. I say, well, actually, he's not. He's just a shopkeeper. But he say, "You're my friend." That's fine. That was not an issue. But one day when I visited the shop, the chicken looked very sick. So I did not buy from him. I went next door to buy chicken from the other shop. When he saw it, he yelled at me. He said, "Why is it today you have now become my enemy?" I said, "Well, that's serious. I mean, I just buy chicken from you. I'm not your enemy." He said, No, you are now my enemy today." I say, "What? You know, you think buying chicken has to do with, you know, it's serious." So again here, friendship are predetermined. Because you live in that community, you are the neighbor, you have to be in the same alliance with the shopkeeper. They assume you have to buy chicken from me, whether sick or good. You know, well or not, you have to buy from me. Otherwise, you are my enemy. Again here, a cultural has a lot to do with how you behave as well. And again here, you can see the result here. Netherlands, top the list, right? Now, of course, you may not agree, particularly having listened to Dr. Lee's talk this afternoon. If you be, sometimes you become oversimplified, right? But of course, in his research, you can see Asian culture, Philippines, Indonesia, the opposite, collective. Now, uncertainty avoidance, again here, some cultures are much more uncertainty avoidance prefer than the other cultures. And if you are in a culture that is strong in uncertainty avoidance, everything has to be written down clearly. Some people complain about OMF. They say our handbook has become thicker and thicker and thicker because we have many rules, right? Everything has to be clear cut. And it's very, very interesting, though, and not this book. Well, Pluterman is a Christian professor, but another book, and he also said this. He lived in Africa for a long time. He said, interestingly, in Africa culture, the cultures that has the least uncertainty avoidance has the fastest and the biggest church growth. Here it is, church growth. Meaning no plans, or plans didn't go according to plan. Things didn't go, and yet has the fastest church growth. Again here, you see here. So, I'm not saying that you should not plan, but again, be very, very careful. Now, again here, the uncertainty avoidance, uncertainty is normal for those, the weak uncertainty avoidance, and strong meaning, it is not normal, to have uncertainty. And again, my example, when I live in Pakistan, often there were bombs, riots, and shooting, and outside our house. Sometimes we cannot go to the hospital to work. I work as a doctor in a hospital. For the first year, we didn't have a phone, so we can't even inform the hospital. We can't get out of the house. But when we had the phone, I called the hospital and said, "Well, I'm sorry, there's a riot going on in front of our house. We can't go to work." "Oh, it's all right. When the shooting stops, just come. Patients can wait." Okay? So they take it as just normal part of the day, so it's okay. If you can't come, you can't come. It's all right. So again, here, they take it easy. That's why low stress and low anxiety. Right? For those who are strong in uncertainty avoidance, high stress, high anxiety. I'm not sure what group you belong to here. Now, again, high context versus low context. Again here. Those who pay attention to high context, anything that is written has negotiable meaning. Now, that's dangerous. For those with low context, anything written, that's it, that's final. Again here, negotiable meaning, anything can be changed. So if you summarize it this way, for low context, everything is linear, written document, and the metaphor is like a nail, sharp, going in. While high context is not a nail, it's a screw. It goes in, but kind of you turn again and again and again. It seems disorganized and circular, but you're not, you're going in. And that's why I don't know whether you have taken a meal, a buffet with Western colleagues. And for Chinese, sometimes we frustrate the Western colleagues. You know why? Because they don't understand the sequence you eat your food in a buffet. They have seen some Asian colleagues went straight to the dessert. They didn't even have the entree. Why do you start with dessert? Oh, because there's a long queue there, so we go to dessert. They're pragmatic, all right? You must start with dessert, with entree. No, we can start with dessert. And you know, some Chinese, they start with soup, they have their main course, and they go back to soup again. Why do you go back to soup again? You finish your soup. No, I haven't yet. We go second round. So to them, it's very, very confusing. Again, here, the cultural difference. And again, here, Japan. And again, here, Korea. I mean, we have our Korean colleagues here as well. Where I don't know this word, nunchi. It's the word meaning eye measure. And that is interpret the non-verbal cues. This is so important, non-verbal cues. But of course here, when you talk about cultural differences, we must understand also we're not talking about culture as well, but your background is very important, how you affect the way you behave. Interesting, some people examine, study, which I don't have time today, look at how ethnic heroes affect your behavior. Different cultures have different heroes. Americans have their own hero. We have our own hero. Japanese has their own heroes. And how that affects the way we behave, because heroes affect the way we formulate what is good, what is bad as well. And so what forms our identity is not just culture, you can see here. You know, personality, your background, your education, your gender, your religion, etc. And of course, many of you are familiar with the MBTI study, the personality test as well. Now, I've talked a lot about culture, but I like Professor Lingenfelter's comment. This word really struck me. He says, we are prisoners of our own culture. I like that challenge. We are prisoners. We are stuck to our culture and we become prisoners. And he quoted from Romans 11. Of course, the word culture is not there, but he says, you notice NIV didn't use the word imprisoned, but almost a lot of other translations in English use the word imprisoned. God has imprisoned all in disobedience. It doesn't mean that God made us disobey. But because of our culture, because the way we are, our sinful nature, we become imprisoned by our own culture. And yet Paul actually reversed that, which I like here, if you understand what Paul was saying in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, and that is that, I might become a slave to all so that I may win more of them. I have become all things to all people, that I might by all means save some. And that's why I particularly like Dr. Lee's comment on covenant this afternoon. What I want to pursue is not a particular culture, but pursue a covenantal culture. Why did I say that? Because Christ has destroyed the barrier, the dividing wall of hostility. Because the default culture is that we learn from our background, our peers, our parents. We inherit all the strengths and the weaknesses as well. Now, interestingly, we have an OMF colleague, a missiologist by the name of Dr. Paul Woods. He's a British, but spoke excellent Mandarin, so he preached often in Mandarin. He preached in Mandarin. And one time I heard him preach on this passage in Mandarin. And he did study on this verse. And 用爱心互相宽容. And he explained this word, to give space to one another. He said the word 宽容 is space. We must give space to one another, to love one another. Different cultures, we are together. And actually, this should not be new to us because as in the afternoon, we heard the lecture already. We already are affected by the culture we live in. Whether you like it or not, we are affected by Confucius' teaching as well. And of course, here you can see here, Confucius, already talked about this in his own teaching. 知者不惑，仁者不憂，勇者不懼。有仁愛之心嘅人不會有憂愁，佢會用寬容博愛來對待別人嘅事。You can see it. This is Confucius' teaching, of course. All right. I give you an example. 3 sisters working together in a restricted country, a country that you're not allowed to preach the gospel openly, not even allowed to give out the Bible openly. But 3 sisters work in a hospital. 2 nurses, 1 doctor. 1 from Taiwan, 1 from America, 1 from Japan. Interestingly, one day, director of the hospital called him in and said, I want to see you. And he thanked these 3 ladies serving in the hospital. He said, I can't understand one thing. I noticed that your cultures are so different, Japanese, Americans, and Taiwanese. And yet, I can see you love each other. You love the patients. I cannot understand except one thing. It must have something to do with your God. That was just an amazing observation by a non-Christian director. And then he said, well, anything I can do for you? And the 3 sisters asked for one thing. They said, can we plant 9 trees at the backyard of the hospital? They say, why 9 trees? And these 3 ladies explained the gospel to this director. They say, well, 9 trees represents the fruits of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. So they planted 9 trees. And everybody saw the 9 trees. They asked why. And they explained the gospel through these 9 trees. Amazing story. And so here, I love what Leanne Romberg says that we should create a climate of trust by making oneself vulnerable, but also by assuming the best in the other person. I like this phrase, assuming the best. Sometimes we don't understand why you behave like this, but I must assume your best. That's the starting point. I think that is my starting point. And I think John Stott says similar things. John Stott, in one of his commentaries, say the weak and the strong disappear from view. This reconciled multi-ethnic community with one heart and one mouth in glorious gospel harmony, worshiping the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. Now I must move on. I hope that we lost a bit of time just now, but I hope that we catch up. So now we come to the part 2, that is the biblical missiological perspective. What I call from leading to following. I want to kind of analyze a section of Romans 15. Many people love the book of Romans as a book, a great book on doctrine. But chapter 15 particularly was a great chapter on what I see as strong missiological concepts here. Actually, the indigenous principle came from this chapter. In a very condensed way, in just 5 verses, Paul described the process, what I call as an indigenous movement, quoting 4 verses from 4 sections of the Old Testament. Let me show you. You can see here, Romans 15, verse 9, all the way to verse 12. I won't go through that verse by verse, but you can see here. Verse 9 was written by David, refers to Jews to praise God among the Gentiles. The second part is to invite the Gentiles to praise God. The third part, the Gentiles themselves will praise God without the Jews. And the fourth part is that the Gentiles from the 4 quarters of the earth will trust in the root of Jesse. I like Bishop Solomon. He was the bishop of the Methodist Church in Singapore. He described it in this way, which I really like. He says, this chapter describes this indigenous movement from I will declare to show you, to you will work with me, to I will work with you, to I marvel and praise God for what he is accomplishing through you. Amazing movement. You can see this description in Romans 15. And of course, it requires trust as well, for Paul himself did not plant the Roman church. And that's why he says, you yourselves are full of goodness. Before Paul was there, the Roman church was already there. So he needed to trust God, that God was already at work. And that's why I like the word pluricentric mission. I prefer this word to polycentric mission, because polycentric mission still talks about, sharing of power. It's kind of very power-based, In the past, it's dominated by the West, the power now is sharing the power. But, a missiologist, a Maori missiologist from New Zealand shared this. I think you may know him, Jay Matanga, who uses this word pluricentric. Is that it's not sharing of power, but rather to be God-centered, to be Christ-like. And the example was this, that before the Portuguese missionaries were there, actually, the church was already there long ago. Don't ever think that we are the one that will bring the gospel to you, a kind of a triumphalistic attitude. Another example was a case study of the China Inland Mission in the 40s. Now, you know that China Inland Mission established many, many churches in China. And the churches, they love the China Inland Mission. And many of the churches have this name, 内地会教会. They use the word 内地会, all right? So in the 30s, China Inland Mission say, please get rid of the word 内地会, because we want you to be truly indigenous. So change to another name. You know how the Chinese church responded? They say, you want us to be truly indigenous. Now you're telling us we should get rid of this name. Should we not decide ourselves whether we want this name or not? Why are you telling us we should get rid of the name? This is another way of controlling. That's not indigenous at all. You see how it was really good that China Inland Mission was confronted with this challenge. The Chinese is saying, if you really want us to be indigenous, we should be the one deciding. And we love the name 内地会. Sometimes they never change. They say, we want to keep the name 内地会. Don't tell us to change. That is not indigenous at all. And again here, about control. Now, Romans 15 used the word hope. And many people use this phrase to refer to personal hope. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace. Okay, personal hope, that is fine. But this hope is not personal hope. If you refer to, this is verse 13, but if you go to verse 12, this is the hope quoted from Isaiah, which has a much bigger meaning, deeper meaning, when they use the word hope. Because if you use the word Isaiah, if you go back to Isaiah 11, you see the chapter here refers to what is that hope? Is that hope from all the nations, Lower Egypt, Upper Egypt, Cush, Elam, Babylon, Hamath, and from the islands of Mediterranean, from all the corners of the earth, joining hands together to praise God. So as I see here, as we talk about intercultural leadership, a truly biblical indigenous mission is never independent. It is always pursuing interdependence. Interdependence. We let go of controlling hands. We offer helping hands. We go forward hand in hand. And the way I translate is 放手,援手,攜手. That's the journey. And again, here is the journey together. And here I want to quote Professor Andrew Walls, what he called the indigenous principle and the pilgrim principle. And of course, we know about the indigenous principle, meaning no other groups is going to impose their way of doing things on one culture. But Andrew Walls also say, apart from the indigenous principle, there is also the pilgrim principles. We cannot remain the same. God will transform our lives. Our lives are transformed by God. So we cannot say, we are like that. We insist on our own culture. Even our own culture is transformed by the gospel. Both the indigenous principle and the pilgrim principle. Now, many of you, or some of you, already attended the Lausanne Congress, the 4th Congress last year. The theme was, I like this theme, let the church declare and display Christ together. Why the two words declare and display? It's verbal and the visual proclamation of Christ. Now, the word together was used very, very carefully. This is the planning committee, as I mentioned. We work together. The word together, from the Greek word homothermodon, used 12 times in the New Testament, 12 times. 10 times it was used in the book of Acts. So again here, being together, as we are from different cultures, being together is so important. And that's why Paul Woods wrote we see a rainbow around the table. It's not the West passing the mission baton to the majority world, but God is adding more hands to it. And why did I say that? You can see there, for the last 100 years, the demographic change. 100 years ago, almost 70-80% of the Christian population in the world are from the West, Europe and North America, you can see here. But now, it's very, very different. You can see the change, complete change. 70-80% belong to Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Does it mean that it is now our turn to do mission? I think Paul gave us this encouragement in Romans 15, verse 1. We who are strong ought to bear with the failings of the weak and not to please ourselves. Now, interestingly, Paul is not saying the Jerusalem church should bear with the weakness of the Gentile church. It's actually reverse. Paul noticed that the Gentile church is coming up to be strong. They say, you need to bear with the weaknesses of the Jerusalem church. And again here, those from the majority world, as we're coming up, we need to just heed this warning as well. Now, because of time, I will cut out 2 slides, but I want to just change the last part, the last 5 to 10 minutes before I finish. I do not want to end with intercultural leadership. I think that is not my end point. That's just from an anthropological perspective. But I want to end with a focus on what I call Jesus-centered leadership rather than intercultural leadership. So what does intercultural leadership look like in the kingdom of God? I want to use 3 biblical images, the 3 S's, being the shepherd, the servant, and the steward. Of course, the image of a shepherd, many of you are familiar with. Whether it's from Psalm 23 or John 10 or Acts 20. Now, again here, I'm learning something from my African brothers and sisters. When the African brothers and sisters read Psalm 23, they never look at, God look after me. God is my shepherd. Yes, that is true, but they always look at it, God is the shepherd of the flock, the group together. To them, the community is so, so key. But I like what Professor Lincoln Felter, when he referred to shepherd leadership, he used the word, differentiated 2 phrases, responsible for and responsible to. He said there's a huge difference. Responsible for type of shepherd leadership is that there is an emotional attachment. There's still the power and control to achieve the results we want. That is responsible for. But responsible to is that there is emotional detachment, that you grant authority, responsibility, and freedom to other people. I like that differentiation. Are you a type of leader that is responsible for or responsible to? The second image is the image of a servant. Now, many people think, servant meaning I just do whatever other people tell me to do. And I think that's what I heard Reverend Chu say last night, as the assistant principal. You do what other people tell you to do. But the word servant, servant in the Bible has a different meaning. And that is, he says here, in Isaiah, will act wisely in John 7. Instead of going to Judea, Jesus refused, stay in Galilee. My time is not yet here. So servant doesn't mean you just do whatever other people tell you to do, but there is a wisdom, acting wisely. And of course, there are many words in the New Testament, and many people study the words on servanthood, and Bishop Hua Yong, who wrote the book on leadership or servanthood, he analyzed that, all the words used belong to people who are close to the bottom of the social ladder. But if you read his book, there's one phrase I like. He says, I struggle with the word servant leader. He said, I don't like the word. Actually, I hate to use the word servant leader. Many of us use the word servant. We should be servant leader. Now, why did he hate the word? He says, because the word servant leader is still about myself wanting to be the leader. It's still about me. It's still very me-centered. Because servanthood is never about myself. It's about my master. Stewardship, again here, Luke 12, being the wise steward or the manager, giving out the food allowance at the proper time. So I think here the stewardship has to do with godly wisdom, doing the right thing at the right time, right? So here are the three pictures: shepherd, servant, and steward. But there's one more S, which you may or may not notice. I picked up from above one more S. I don't know whether you guess what word is that. One more S is the word spectacle. Spectacle. Because Paul says that we have been made a spectacle to the whole universe, to angels as well as to human beings. We are fools for Christ, but you are so wise in Christ. We are weak, but we are strong. You are strong. You are honored, and we are dishonored. What he meant by being a spectacle is being vulnerable. Vulnerable. And I want to show you this picture, being vulnerable. Dixon Host. Host was one of the Cambridge Seven. And you heard about the Cambridge Seven who came to China in 1885. He came from a very wealthy family, extremely wealthy, from Cambridge, one of the Cambridge Seven. He arrived in China at the age of 25. He left China at the age of 85. I repeat, 85, 60 years in China. Amazing. And this kind of the environment he was in. I mean, you can see the picture, right? Now, when he became, of course, initially it was Hudson Taylor leading, but Hudson Taylor became very ill, and it was the Boxer uprising. A lot of people died. And so Hudson Taylor was so ill, he said, I need somebody to help me. So they chose him. He was 39 years old when he became the leader. 39. I can imagine. 39, he became the top leader of the China Inland Mission. When he became the leader, this is what he asked people to pray for. And I was amazed. He wrote to the churches and said, please pray for me. What did he ask for prayer? He says, first, we may, as a mission, retain the spirit of willingness to be small, to be despised, to be poor, and to suffer. I mean, who would ask, as you become the leader, say, please help us to be small? I mean, all Bible seminaries need to grow. We want to be big, right? More students, more teachers, more money. He asked the reverse. Help us to remain, to retain the spirit to be small. And he asked people to pray. He said, unless we are constantly and faithfully wrestling in the heavenlies against the power of darkness, there is a real danger of us becoming involved in wrestling with our colleagues. Choose your battle well. Are you fighting a battle against each other? Or are you fighting a battle in the heavenlies against the power of darkness? A strong challenge. And so here I want to end by thinking about, Jesus-oriented, Jesus-centered leadership, not just intercultural leadership. Jesus being the shepherd, the servant, the steward for us. And the last S is also the spectator, being vulnerable. I told you that Host came to China at the age of 25. He left China at the age of 85. The year he went back to England, within the 1 year he died. He died at the age of 86. So when he died, the Chinese church sort of missed him. The leaders of CIM missed him. And they say, okay, what do we remember him? He's been in China 60 years. He's a very low-key leader. What do we remember him? The following is what I'm going to show you. It's not what he said. It's what people remember him. All right? Not what he said. What people remember him. He lived to be forgotten so that Christ can be remembered. That's what people remember. And I pray that that may be true to us as well. In a Jesus-centered leadership, we pray that it's the same. We live to be forgotten so that Christ can be remembered. So from intercultural leadership to Jesus-centered leadership. Thank you. I think I went over time a little bit. Thank you. I hope that's not too late.